You are about to discover what lies beyond the fifth dimension, beyond the deepest, darkest corner of the imagination, in the Tower of Terror, because you've just entered the Twilight Zone. What a great ride, or heck, rides plural actually. There have been 4 different Towers of Terror over time, but hey, what are those similarities and differences between them? And which one of them is actually the best Tower of Terror? Well, let's go ahead and talk about it all after the intro. Well, hello there, my name's Jeremy and welcome back to Freeform Disney. It's back to the Disney parks today and, well, we're going to talk all about Tower of Terror. Now, Tower of Terror is an imposing ride from the moment you see it. And it's such a tall building that you can see it from miles away. Like everything Disney, theming is king. As you get closer to the Hollywood Tower Hotel, it only gets more disquieting. The ride is inspired by the Twilight Zone, old show that has been revived multiple times as such a sci-fi classic right there. And well, after you enter, there's a pre-show room where you even get to hear from Rod Serling, the host and creator of the Twilight Zone himself. Or actually, you see him and his voice is provided by Mark Silverman, who sounds like him, because that original show was over 60 years ago. And from there, it's on into the boiler room and then into your elevator so you can enter the Twilight Zone. And time for a giant drop tower. You'll get multiple big drops with a little more theming in there, and then it's done. Time to head out to the gift shop and, well, maybe get in line again. Although, that can be a long line for that ride. Well, anyway, there are currently 3 different versions of Tower of Terror in operation. Yes, let me get this out of the way right off the bat. Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout may use the same ride system as Tower of Terror, but it's no more a version of Tower of Terror than Small World is a version of Pirates of the Caribbean, just because they're both boat rides that go through in a dark ride style. That out of the way, let's go ahead and go onward. Although if you want to hear more about that, I'll probably talk about Guardians in a video next week, so stay tuned. Well then, let's start from the beginning. Tower of Terror originally opened in Walt Disney World at what is now Hollywood Studios back in 1994. Now don't worry, I'm not going to go do a whole Disney World history video. Now there's tons of interesting history here, but I'll save that for another video. Suffice to say, it was a smash hit and the feature attraction of that park for decades to come, only being beaten out perhaps by Galaxy's Edge, which opened over 20 years later. And eventually, because of that success, it spawned 3 other versions. So 10 years after it was originally opened, in 2004, the first copycat opened over in Disney California Adventure, was a less expensive version tossed in to increase demand for the park. 2 years after that, Walt Disney Studios at Disneyland Paris opened its version, which was, well, very similar to California Adventures, pretty much a carbon copy. And then a single year after that, Tokyo DisneySea opened their version, which is actually the most radically different of the 4 while still maintaining the Tower of Terror moniker. And hey, aside from the Tower of Terror and California Adventure, which closed in 2017 to be replaced by the Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, all the rest of the Tower of Terrors are still open and, well, very popular. Okay, so let's talk some more about the similarities and differences between these 4 rides. We'll start outside and work our way in. First up, the building. The biggest of the 4 buildings actually is the original, and also Tokyo DisneySea. The buildings are just short of 200 feet tall, which actually makes it the 2nd tallest feature in Walt Disney World, and apparently, as I read, one of the tallest in Tokyo DisneySea. The other 2, which are almost duplicates of each other, are about 183 feet tall, so not too much shorter. We're talking, what, 16 feet or so? And along with having the tallest building, the elevator also goes highest in the original one in Walt Disney World, all the way up to 170 feet, while the others are all modeled in much of the same style at 157 feet each. So that means your drops might be a little bit shorter in those ones. Interesting little difference, actually. So I suppose that might give the edge a little to the original. How about the exterior lines? It's time to get in line and go into the ride. Well, they all vary in their theming and their immersiveness because their styles are a bit different. Now, I think the general consensus is that Walt Disney World has the most immersive queue line, which is really helped out by the feeling so separate from the rest of the park. Lots of space in Florida, right? And the other three have a lot of similarity to how some of their queue lines work, back to that same model design being duplicated across. Even in Tokyo DisneySea, it's not that different outside, except for a little bit of the theme. And now you may have noticed that there are 3 distinct styles to the buildings themselves. The original actually has what is called a Neo-Mediterranean style, which is actually very important because, well, here's a special little known fact for you. The building can actually be seen over in Epcot behind the Morocco Pavilion. It's part of the skyline, actually. And most people don't even catch that. So you see it there and it has to blend in. Pretty cool. The next 2 are both a Pueblo Deco style, and to be honest, I think it's probably the least interesting looking of the whole bunch, but it's nice to have different looks to them rather than them all being the exact same. And finally, the last one over in Tokyo DisneySea is a Moorish revival architectural style, and man, it is cool looking right there. Probably my favorite look for a building overall, but not the one that would win this category for me, because Tower of Terror in Walt Disney World is probably the one that gives me the most scary hotel feeling. And so that one would win the cake here for Tower of Terror just because, well, I may love the look of the Moorish revival. Oh man, it's not as terrifying as heading down to Hollywood Studios. And now we're inside, and hey, how does the ride structurally work? Well, only the original one is really a lot different than the rest. For the original, the elevator cars actually have to move a decent bit to get to the drop shaft, and this means that the ride gets a neat 5th dimension transition hallway that all the others lack. That difference also means that in Walt Disney World, the ride ends in a different location than it starts. And that allows for a special room at the end with a little bit of extra theming. Now, the other 3 Tower Terrors are all the same design and all start and end in the exact same spot, which means you have to do something weird because we don't want to see everybody getting off the elevators. So what they do is they have a hallway in between where you enter and the ride itself. And that hurts the theming a little when you have to cross that hallway, but at least you don't see people getting back off. Now, there are a few other tiny differences for the original versus the other 3, such as, say, the loading docks only have 1 level instead of 2 separate levels. And there are actually only 2 drop shafts in the original versus 3. But the original also has 4 different lift shafts, which are not present in the other Towers of Terror, which just use those 3 main shafts. And hey, here's a great set of diagrams to try to show you how that worked in the original one there. It's really actually pretty cool, so Tower Secrets put that out. Now, the advantages here I think all go to the original Tower of Terror, as it makes that theming work so much better, not having to cross the hallway, getting the extra cool 5th dimension transition hallway, which definitely bumps the ride up that much further. Now, here is something the original doesn't have. Something called the Wave Goodbye section. This is a giant mirror that the elevator stops at, and you wave goodbye to yourselves, and you get to see everybody else too. And then you fade away until the mirror reflects an empty elevator. It's a spooky and fun little addition. Great photo opportunity too. All 3 versions other than the original have this one, and I think it's a great bonus in there. Definitely the edge goes to all 3 of the other ones on that. And here's something I'm going to quickly touch on and then move on. So there's something called ride profiles. This is what the pattern of the drops are like. So maybe you have a big drop, then a little drop, then a huge one, then maybe another little one, or some other pattern as to how the drops work. That's a ride profile. And there's randomization and a variety of possibilities that have been introduced to the different rides. At one point, Walt Disney World had a huge edge on all the other Tower of Terrors because it was the first one to have added this new feature of different ride profiles and randomization. But since then, new ride profiles and randomization have been added to the other parks as well. So ultimately, there may be some differences in the ride profiles available, but you'll have to ride the ride a fair bit to even start to feel them all. So hard to say where the edge may go on this one. And with that, it's time to talk about the story of each ride. Originally, the first three all pretty much had the same Twilight Zone story, even if it was slightly extended for Walt Disney World. Disney Tokyo Sea, on the other hand, is quite different, and we're going to get to that one in a moment. So California Adventure kept the same theme throughout its entire life, never changed, just kind of a light take on the original. But Disneyland Paris' Tower of Terror recently got an upgrade in late 2019. Now there are 3 different storylines you might get, along with a variety of drops to change how each story feels. They call it a new dimension of chills, and the 3 possibilities are the malevolent machine, the shaft creatures, and the 5th dimension. And from everything I've seen and heard, this is a superb addition. And I always love a little variety. I wish they add something like this to the other 2 somewhere in the future, because this extra variety is just a great piece. So nice little piece right there for good old Paris. And hey, for story, we've already kind of talked about the original story is the old people who were in the elevator at a height of Hollywood, and then the Twilight Zone struck, shall we say, and they disappeared when the elevator plummeted. Something of that nature. Now you're sucked into there too. Well, anyway, the most unique story though is not that one, because we've got that in 3 of them, or 2 that remain nowadays. It's over at Tokyo DisneySea, which doesn't actually have Twilight Zone theme at all. Apparently there was concern that Japanese citizens just didn't have enough connection to the theme of the Twilight Zone, so instead they went for a completely original theme. Instead of the Hollywood Tower Hotel, this one is the Hotel Hightower, and it's named after the famous but fictional Harrison Hightower III. It's set in New York, and Hightower's a rich aristocratic collector of antiques. He even brags to the writers, as we see in an old video, about some of his plunder and how he stole this idol called Shariki Utundu. Unsurprisingly, things don't end well for him. He's cursed and killed by falling down an elevator shaft. And fun for us, we the writers are getting to come back at a cool tour of his old hotel and get to hear about it all. And well, the curse kind of comes back and we end up in a drop ride. Yup. This makes for all kinds of neat thematic story elements all throughout the ride, and I think certainly it has more than a passing familiarity with the Twilight Zone excuse for the ride. Now, all that said, which ride do I think has the best story? Ooh, this is a tough one. It's so good, but I'm gonna have to go ahead and give the edge here to Tokyo DisneySea. Now, I haven't ridden it, but I've seen videos of it and the talk about it, and that theme is so impressive right there. But hey, they really do each have their perks. Aside from the old California Adventure, which is just kind of a knockoff of the original, aside from that anyway. Okay, and with that, well, there are some other minor differences, such as they have different Easter eggs in them, and, well, hidden Mickeys that might change, but these really aren't significant in how the ride feels. So I think that this really gives you a fairly decent feel for the different Towers of Terror. Now, if you're curious about the Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout ride, I'm gonna go ahead and do a video on that next week, so stay tuned. I'll talk about that, talk about the differences between it and Tower of Terror. But hey, let me go ahead and say one last word of warning, something you won't find in any guidebook. The next time you check into a deserted hotel on the dark side of Hollywood, make sure you know just what kind of vacancy you're filling, or you may find yourself a permanent resident of the Twilight Zone. Yeah, I couldn't help myself, I wanted to toss it in. I love the Twilight Zone theme. Even if I gave that edge over to Tokyo DisneySea. Such a great theme to pair with Tower of Terror. Anyway, well, what about you? I've talked enough here. Which versions of Tower of Terror have you ridden, and do you have a favorite between them? And let me go ahead and know down below in the comments. And like usual, let me take a moment also to thank my wonderful patrons. If you're interested in helping support the channel through Patreon, any amount means so much to me, and I definitely appreciate it. There's a link down below in the description. I'll see you there. And hey, for everyone watching this video, thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, definitely it always helps out if you click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another new episode of Freeform Disney. Have a magical day, and may the force be with you always.